Your date is here? Your heart pounds. Do you have a forehead so high it could touch the clouds? Is your complexion as pale as fresh snow? What about your eyebrows? Are they there at all? Number 6. The forehead focus, achieving the high brow and beyond. When a medieval woman prepared for a significant social encounter, perhaps a gathering at court, a feast, or a meeting with an eligible suitor, the emphasis on her forehead was paramount. This was not a subtle suggestion, but a defining characteristic of beauty, especially among the noble classes from the 14th century onwards. A high, smooth, and expansive forehead was considered the epitome of elegance, a sign of intellect, and a canvas for light. It was often paired with a long, slender neck, completing an ideal of graceful, almost swan-like femininity. This aesthetic preference meant that many women went to remarkable lengths to achieve this look, often starting with the hairline itself. Pursuit of a perfectly high forehead frequently involved the removal of hair from the very top of the brow, and sometimes even several inches back into the scalp. This was not a quick or painless process, yet it was embraced with dedication. One common method was simple plucking. Women would use small tweezers, sometimes crafted from bone, ivory, or carefully worked metal. These tools, often found in archaeological digs alongside personal grooming kits, demonstrate the meticulous nature of medieval beauty routines. Each individual hair, from the hairline down to the brow, would be grasped and pulled. This required considerable patience and a high tolerance for discomfort. For those with thicker, more stubborn hair, the process could be drawn out and painful, but the aesthetic reward was deemed worth the effort. Beyond plucking, other, more drastic methods were sometimes employed. Historical records and medical texts from the period, such as the famous medical compilation known as Trotula, offer glimpses into these practices. While the Trotula primarily focused on women's health and gynecology, sections also delved into cosmetic preparations, indicating the close link between well-being and appearance. One such method involved the use of depilatory creams. These concoctions were often made from a mix of ingredients, some surprisingly harsh by modern standards. For instance, recipes might include quicklime, a strong alkaline substance mixed with arsenic, a highly toxic element. These ingredients would be blended with substances like vinegar, a solvent, or various plant extracts to create a paste. This paste would then be carefully applied to the desired area, left for a short period, and then scraped off, hopefully, removing the hair along with it. The risks associated with such chemical mixtures, including skin irritation, burns, and absorption of toxins, were undoubtedly high, yet the desire for the fashionable high forehead often outweighed these dangers. The precise proportions and application methods were often passed down through oral tradition or found in private recipe books of noble households, reflecting a clandestine knowledge of beauty secrets. Another technique involved the use of resin or wax. Similar to modern waxing, heated resin, often derived from pine or other trees or beeswax, would be applied to the skin. Once it cooled and hardened slightly, it would be quickly pulled off, taking the hair with it. This method, while still painful, was perhaps less overtly dangerous than the chemical depilatories, offering a more enduring smoothness than simple plucking. The availability of these materials, such as beeswax from local apiaries or resin from forest trees, made this a more accessible option across different social strata, though the quality of the wax and the skill of application varied. The symbolic significance of the high forehead extended beyond mere fashion. It was often associated with purity and innocence, a clear, unblemished expanse signifying a mind free from worldly concerns. In artistic representations, particularly in illuminated manuscripts and paintings of the Virgin Mary or saints, the high forehead was a common feature. Artists depicted women with extremely high hairlines, sometimes even seemingly receding far back on the head, emphasizing this ideal. This artistic trend mirrored and perhaps even amplified the real-world beauty standards. For example, in portraits of noble women from the Burgundian court in the 15th century, such as those by Rogier van der Weyden or Jan van Eyck, the subject's forehead is almost always prominently displayed, often accentuated by hairline or left it completely exposed. The extent of hair removal depended on individual preference and the specific fashion trends of the region and time. While some women might only pluck a few stray hairs, others would remove several inches of their hairline, creating a dramatic expanse of skin above the eyes. This practice was particularly noticeable in periods when elaborate headwear, like the towering hennin or the draped escoffion, became popular. These hats often completely covered the hair on the back and sides of the head, leaving only the forehead and face visible. A clean, high forehead served as the perfect frame for these impressive constructions, drawing attention upwards towards the face and the intricate details of the headwear itself. For example, a 15th century hennin, a tall cone-shaped hat, would often be worn with a veil draped over it, obscuring all hair except for the meticulously sculpted forehead. The social implications of this beauty standard were profound. For a woman from a wealthy or noble family, appearing with a low hairline or unruly wisps of hair around her forehead might have been seen as a sign of carelessness or a lack of attention to personal grooming. Could even subtly suggest a lower social standing, as manual laborers or peasants, exposed to the sun and lacking the time or resources for such elaborate grooming, often had sun-darkened skin and less refined hair management. Thus, the high forehead became a subtle marker of leisure, wealth, and status, a visual declaration of a woman's position within society. It was a clear demonstration that she had the means and the time to dedicate to her appearance, an investment in her social presentation. Even beyond the physical alteration, the psychological aspect of this trend cannot be understated. The act of preparing the forehead, whether through painful plucking or the risky application of depilatories, was a ritual of transformation. It was a conscious effort to conform to a prevailing ideal of beauty, to enhance one's attractiveness for public display, and to project an image of refinement and desirability. For a big date or any important social engagement, presenting a perfectly smooth and high forehead was not merely about looking good. It was about presenting oneself as a woman of taste, status, and adherence to the prevailing ideals of the era. It was a statement without words, a visual cue understood by all members of medieval society, signaling readiness for courtship, social interaction, and a serious business of life in the upper echelons. The smooth skin catching the candlelight in a dimly lit hall would offer a subtle glow, drawing eyes to the features of the face, promising a captivating presence. Number 5. The luminous veil, creating the ideal pale complexion. For a medieval lady preparing for a significant encounter, perhaps a courtly dance or an important dinner, the pursuit of a porcelain white complexion was as crucial as any elaborate hairstyle or gown. Paleness was not merely a fleeting trend, it was a deeply ingrained symbol of beauty, status, and health throughout much of the Middle Ages, especially in Western Europe. A woman's skin, free from the sun's touch, conveyed that she belonged to the leisure class, one that did not toil in fields under the sun's harsh gaze. Sun-darkened skin was associated with peasant life, with manual labor, and an outdoor existence. Therefore, to be truly beautiful, one had to cultivate a complexion as pristine as fresh snow. Achieving this ethereal pallor began with avoiding the sun. This was the most fundamental and universally practiced method. Women of means rarely ventured outdoors without appropriate coverings. Large, wide-brimmed hats were common, often adorned with elaborate decorations, providing not only style but also essential shade. Veils, wimples, and gorgets, which covered the head and neck, also served to protect the face from tanning. A noblewoman might also carry a small parasol, a practical accessory designed solely to block out the sun's rays during short outdoor excursions. These preventative measures were a daily routine, an unconscious habit woven into the fabric of daily life for anyone aspiring to a high social standing. Even when indoors, noblewomen spent much of their time within castle walls, shielded from harsh light, further preserving their prized complexions. Beyond prevention, direct applications to the skin were employed to enhance paleness or to mask blemishes. One of the most famous and widely used cosmetic ingredients for whitening the skin was white lead, also known as ceruse. This substance, derived from lead carbonate, was ground into a fine powder and mixed with various binding agents, such as vinegar or egg white, to create a paste or liquid foundation. It was then carefully applied to the face, neck, and décolletage to create an even white appearance. While effective in achieving the desired pallor, white lead was highly toxic. Regular use led to a range of severe health problems, including skin disfigurement, hair loss, tooth decay, and eventually organ damage and even death. Despite these known risks, its widespread use persisted for centuries due to its unparalleled ability to create a flawless, luminous white finish. The stark whiteness provided by ceruse was considered the gold standard, reflecting candlelight beautifully in dimly lit medieval halls, making the wearer appear almost otherworldly. For those who could not afford or chose not to use ceruse, or perhaps were aware of its dangers, other natural alternatives were available. Flour, particularly finely milled wheat flour, was a common and accessible option. It could be lightly dusted onto the face to absorb oil and provide a matte, pale finish. Similarly, powdered alabaster, a soft white mineral, was sometimes used for a slightly more luminous effect. For the exceptionally wealthy, pulverized pearls or crushed mother of pearl might be mixed into creams, offering a subtle shimmer and a touch of unparalleled luxury to the complexion. These natural powders often provided a temporary effect, requiring reapplication throughout the day or evening, particularly in humid conditions. Beyond immediate whitening, medieval skecking focused on creating a clear, unblemished canvas. Herbal remedies were frequently employed. Rose water, distilled from rose petals, was a popular toner and cleanser, known for its mild, astringent properties and pleasant scent. It was believed to soothe the skin and reduce redness. Vinegar, diluted with water, was also used as a facial wash, thought to tighten pores and refresh the skin. Herbal infusions made from plants like chamomile, lavender, or elderflower were used as washes or compresses to calm irritated skin and improve overall clarity. Many women relied on homemade recipes passed down through generations, combining locally available plants with simple bases like honey or animal fats. Milk baths were another luxurious and cleansing practice, particularly among the nobility. Cleopatra's legendary milk baths were certainly known, and medieval women sometimes emulated this practice, using ass's milk or cow's milk. Milk was believed to soften the skin, lighten the complexion, and provide nourishment, while a full milk bath was an indulgence for the very rich smaller applications, such as washing the face with milk or creating milk-based poultices, were more widely accessible. Egg whites were also prized for their temporary skin-tightening effects, often applied as a mask before important events to give the face a smoother, more youthful appearance. Internal health was also considered vital for external beauty. The medieval understanding of medicine often revolved around the theory of humors, the four bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, that were believed to govern health and temperament. An imbalance in these humors was thought to manifest in various ailments, including skin problems. Therefore, treatments like bloodletting or purging were sometimes prescribed, not just for illness, but to purify the body and improve one's complexion. Clear, pale skin was seen as a sign of internal purity and a balanced constitution, making such practices a sometimes brutal yet accepted part of the beauty regimen. Texts like the Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, a medieval medical treatise from the school of Salerno, offered advice on diet, exercise, and hygiene for maintaining health and beauty, often advocating for a balanced lifestyle to achieve a radiant complexion. Pursuit of pallor was not merely about aesthetic preference, it was interwoven with religious and moral connotations. Purity, innocence, and spiritual grace were often associated with whiteness. In religious art, saints and figures of virtue were almost invariably depicted with fair, unblemished skin. This religious ideal subtly reinforced the secular beauty standard, making the pale complexion a multi-layered symbol of desirability. For a lady preparing for a date, her luminous, unblemished face would signal not just her beauty, but also her refinement, her virtue, and her privileged place in society, silently communicating a message of desirability and suitability. It was a complete package, meant to captivate the eye and affirm her standing. Number 4. The whisper of color, enhancing lips and cheeks with nature's touch. As a medieval woman finalized her appearance for a special date, the addition of color to her lips and cheeks was approached with extreme caution and subtlety. Unlike modern aesthetics that often celebrate bold, defined makeup, the medieval ideal for facial color was one of natural vitality and a delicate flush, so subtle that it might appear as if it arose from within. Overt application of cosmetics, especially bright or artificial-looking colors, was often associated with actresses, prostitutes, or women of ill repute. For a lady of good standing, the aim was to suggest good health, youthful vigor, and perhaps a touch of romantic excitement, all while maintaining an air of demure naturalness. For the lips, the desired effect was a gentle, natural redness, as if kissed by nature or slightly flushed from excitement. This was far from the vibrant, opaque lipsticks of later eras. Primary method was to enhance the lips' natural color without appearing to have applied anything at all. One common technique involved simply biting or rubbing the lips gently to stimulate blood flow, creating the temporary, natural flush. This simple action would give the lips a delicate rosiness, making them appear fuller and healthier when natural methods were not enough. Or for those desiring a slightly more noticeable tint, plant-based dyes were employed. Madder root, derived from the Rubia tinctorum plant, was a popular source for a red pigment. The root would be ground into a powder and mixed with animal fat or beeswax to create a subtle balm, which could then be dabbed onto the lips. The resulting color was usually a soft, muted red or pink, not a vivid hue. Another source of red pigment was cochineal, an insect-derived dye that produced a rich crimson. While more commonly used for dyeing textiles, cochineal could also be processed into a cosmetic pigment. It was crushed, mixed with a carrier like honey or oil, and carefully applied to the lips. Berries, such as mulberries or cherries, provided another readily available option. Their juices could be lightly pressed onto the lips, leaving a faint, natural stain that would fade quickly but was easily reapplied. The application was always delicate, aiming for a sheer wash of color rather than a thick, opaque layer. The goal was to give the impression of a natural flush, as if the lips were simply a deeper shade of healthy pink. The approach to coloring the cheeks followed a similar philosophy of understated enhancement. A rosy blush was desired, signifying good health, modesty, and youthful vibrancy. This was not a contouring technique or a dramatic pop of color, but rather a soft diffusion of warmth. Again, natural stimulation was sometimes the first step. Gently pinching or rubbing the cheeks could bring a temporary flush to the surface, mimicking the natural blush of excitement or exertion. This was a particularly favored method for maintaining an appearance of innate beauty without relying on external aids. When a more lasting or noticeable effect was desired, similar plant-based pigments used for the lips found their way to the cheeks. Madder root and cochineal were popular choices. These pigments would be finely ground and mixed with a base of animal fat, wax, or even honey to create a cream or paste. This mixture would then be lightly dabbed onto the apples of the cheeks and carefully blended outwards using fingers or a soft cloth. The key was to ensure the application was almost imperceptible, creating a sheer, translucent wash of color that seemed to emanate from beneath the skin. The goal was to appear naturally flushed, not to have obvious streaks of color. Another botanical source for cheek color was alkanet root. This plant produced a reddish-purple dye that could be used to create a more berry-toned blush. Like other plant-based pigments, it would be prepared as a powder or mixed into a balm. Natural berry juices from strawberries or raspberries were also sometimes used for a fleeting, fresh tint. These ephemeral colors served to give the face a subtle lift, suggesting a natural warmth and liveliness without appearing artificial. The restraint in applying color was not solely an aesthetic choice. It was deeply intertwined with moral and social codes. In medieval society, overt makeup was often viewed with suspicion, associated with vanity, deceit, and even moral depravity. Religious teachings and moralistic texts frequently condemned women who painted their faces, viewing it as an attempt to defy God's natural creation and to mislead others. These condemnations were not mere suggestions, but often severe pronouncements, reinforcing the idea that a truly virtuous woman should display natural beauty. Sumptuary laws, though primarily focused on clothing and textiles, sometimes extended to personal adornment, subtly influencing how much and what type of cosmetics were considered acceptable for different social classes. Therefore, for a woman attending an important date, the careful, almost invisible application of color was a delicate balancing act. She aimed to enhance her features just enough to appear radiant and desirable, without crossing the line into artificiality or impropriety. A faint blush on the cheeks might suggest a touch of shyness or excitement, while subtly tinted lips hinted at a healthy vitality. These carefully calibrated touches of color worked in harmony with the pale complexion and high forehead, creating a unified look that was both fashionable and morally acceptable within the confines of medieval society. The goal was to suggest natural beauty, not to create it, a distinction that was profoundly significant for her standing and reputation. Her appearance, even in its most subtle details, communicated her character and her respect for societal norms, a silent but powerful message to her suitor. Number 3. The bare canvas, sculpting eyebrows and eyelashes for definition. As a medieval woman meticulously prepared herself for a significant date, the treatment of her eyebrows and eyelashes was often the dramatic departure from modern beauty standards. Instead of emphasizing thickness or length, the prevailing aesthetic in many periods of the Middle Ages, particularly from the 14th century onwards, favored a minimal, almost invisible approach. The aim was to create a clean, expansive facial canvas, especially to complement the highly valued, smooth and expansive forehead. This often meant plucking, thinning, or even completely removing eyebrows, and at times eyelashes. The removal of eyebrows served several purposes within the medieval beauty ideal. Firstly, it contributed to the coveted high forehead, extending the smooth expanse of skin above the eyes without interruption. A visible dark eyebrow line could break up this desired continuous curve, drawing attention away from the forehead's pristine quality. By thinning or removing the eyebrows, the face appeared more open, almost childlike in its purity, which was a highly desirable trait. Secondly, it emphasized the eyes themselves. Without a strong brow line, the eyes became the focal point, appearing larger and more luminous. This focus on the eyes, often described as windows to the soul, was a subtle yet powerful enhancement, The primary method for eyebrow removal was plucking. Just as with the hairline, women would use small tweezers crafted from bone, ivory, or metal to systematically remove individual eyebrow hairs. This was a painstaking and often painful process requiring remarkable patience and a steady hand. For some, the removal was complete, leaving a smooth, unbroken expanse of skin where the eyebrows would naturally sit. For others, a very thin, faint line might be left, or a barely perceptible arch might be drawn on with a very light pigment to suggest a brow without any actual hair. This delicate application of a drawn-on brow, if done at all, was exceedingly subtle, aiming to mimic the natural curve without any visible hair. Concept of thinning or removing eyelashes, while less universally practiced than eyebrow alteration, was also present. Some historical accounts and artistic representations suggest that eyelashes were occasionally plucked or trimmed. The rationale behind this was often to further emphasize the open, bright appearance of the eye, preventing any perceived shadow or distraction that thick lashes might cast. It also contributed to the overall effect of a clean, unblemished face, where every feature was distinct and unburdened by excessive hair. While less common, the idea of a completely bare eye area underscored the medieval preference for a delicate, almost ethereal facial aesthetic. The extent of eyebrow and eyelash manipulation varied by social class and regional fashion. Among the nobility and upper classes, where adherence to prevailing beauty standards was paramount, these practices were more rigorously followed. A woman from a noble household would have the leisure and the tools necessary for such meticulous grooming. Artists of the period, particularly in Northern European portraiture from the 14th and 15th centuries, frequently depicted women with either very sparse or completely absent eyebrows, affirming this as a widespread and accepted beauty ideal. For instance, in the works of artists like Jan van Eyck, the subjects often feature strikingly high hairlines and virtually no eyebrows, lending them a distinct, almost otherworldly beauty that aligns with the desired purity and pallor of the time. Contrast this with the natural, often unruly eyebrows and lashes of peasants or working-class women, whose lives did not permit such elaborate grooming, or whose faces were exposed to the elements. The finely plucked or absent brow thus became another subtle marker of social distinction, a visual cue signifying leisure, refinement, and adherence to the refined tastes of the elite. It was a silent indicator of a woman's status, her ability to invest time and resources in achieving the fashionable ideal. The historical reasons for this unusual aesthetic preference are complex. Beyond simply complementing the high forehead, the bare brow might have also been seen as a sign of intellectualism or purity, an unencumbered canvas allowing the light of intelligence to shine through. The lack of heavy eyebrows could also have been interpreted as a rejection of overt sensuality, aligning with the moralistic undertones prevalent in medieval society that often viewed excessive adornment with suspicion. By minimizing features that might be seen as overtly expressive or seductive, women could project an image of modesty and inner virtue. For a woman preparing for a significant date, the precise sculpting of her eyebrows and eyelashes was a crucial step in presenting her best self. It was a delicate balance between conforming to societal expectations and subtly enhancing her natural features. Perfectly smooth forehead, complemented by an unburdened eye area, would draw attention to her eyes and face, allowing her expressions to be clear and unhindered. This careful cultivation of a bare canvas provided a striking contrast to modern beauty ideals. But for a medieval suitor, it presented a vision of refined beauty, purity, and adherence to the era's sophisticated aesthetic. It was a face designed for thoughtful contemplation, for gentle conversation, and for reflecting the subtle candlelight of a formal evening. Number 2. The cascading glory, mastering feminine hair, styles, and adornments. When a medieval woman prepared for a momentous occasion, perhaps a grand feast or a significant meeting. The arrangement and adornment of her hair were paramount. While some periods emphasized concealment, others celebrated elaborate displays. But in every instance, hairstyling was a complex art, deeply intertwined with social status, marital state, and prevailing fashion. The overarching goal was to project an image of grace, modesty, or opulence depending on the specific circumstances and the woman's position in society. For married women, particularly in the later Middle Ages, veiling and elaborate headwear were often a mandatory part of daily attire, and especially so for formal occasions. The veil was a symbol of modesty, piety, and marital status, signifying that a woman was taken and therefore required to cover her hair. Wimples, which were pieces of cloth draped around the neck and chin, often paired with a simple veil over the head, were common, created a neat, enclosed silhouette, obscuring the hair almost entirely. Gorgets, similar to wimples but extending further over the chest, provided even more coverage. These coverings were not merely functional. They were often made from fine linens or silks, meticulously pleated or starched, indicating the wearer's wealth and attention to detail. For a date, the neatness and quality of the wimple or veil would convey a woman's elegance and adherence to social norms, a quiet statement of her refined upbringing. Beneath these layers of fabric, hair was often elaborately braided. Long, thick braids were pervasive style, seen across various social classes. For noble women, these braids could be extraordinarily long, sometimes reaching to the knees, often supplemented with false hair or hair extensions to achieve the desired voluminous effect. These lengthy braids were not always left to hang freely. More often, they were carefully wrapped around the head, creating a crown-like effect, or coiled over the ears and secured within decorative cages called cauls or temples. These cauls, made of intricately worked metal mesh, silk netting, or even jewels, served as elegant enclosures for the coiled braids, adding another layer of ornamentation. The resulting effect was a neat, structured hairstyle that was both modest and visually impressive, framing the face without overtly displaying the hair itself. Unmarried women, especially younger ones, had more freedom with their hair. They were often permitted to wear their hair flowing freely or in simpler braids, sometimes adorned with ribbons, circlets, or flower garlands. Long, unbound hair was a sign of youth and virginity, a natural beauty that was yet to be tamed by marriage. For a young woman attending a date, wearing her hair long and loose, perhaps subtly braided with a ribbon, could signal her availability and youthful charm while still maintaining an air of gentility. Hair color also held significance and was sometimes altered. While natural hair colors were generally accepted, certain shades were considered more desirable or symbolic. Red hair, for instance, often associated with royalty and nobility in some regions, like parts of England and France, was sometimes augmented or imitated. Women might use natural dyes, like henna or saffron, to achieve reddish or golden tones. Saffron, a precious spice, would impart a rich golden hue, while turmeric, another spice, could also be used for a more vibrant yellow. For those desiring blonde hair, particularly in regions where it was less common, natural solutions like lye or prolonged sun exposure were sometimes attempted, though with varying and often damaging results. Conversely, women wishing to darken their hair might use concoctions made from gall nuts or iron filings, which react with hair to create darker shades. These alterations, while not as dramatic as modern chemical dyes, allowed for subtle changes in appearance, aligning with prevailing ideals of beauty. Hair care itself was a meticulous process. Regular washing, though not daily, was practiced using herbal rinses, often infused with rosemary, chamomile, or soapwort for cleansing and fragrance. Combs, crafted from bone, ivory, or wood, were essential tools for detangling and smoothing the hair. For shine and conditioning, women might apply small amounts of olive oil or other plant-based oils to their hair. making it appear lustrous and well-maintained. The health and appearance of the hair were considered reflections of overall well-being and a woman's dedication to her personal presentation. A well-groomed, neatly styled head of hair, whether veiled or artfully arranged, communicated a woman's diligence and her status. Choice of hair ornaments further emphasized social standing and occasion. Simple ribbons woven into braids might suffice for everyday wear, but for a special date, more elaborate embellishments were common. Jeweled nets, pearls sewn into hair coverings, or golden circlets were favored by noble women puting their wealth and prestige. These ornaments were often intricately crafted, reflecting the artistry and craftsmanship of the period. A lady's headwear was not merely functional, it was a statement piece carefully chosen to complement her gown and project an image of splendor and refinement. In essence, a medieval woman's hair was a complex canvas for self-expression and social signaling. From the elaborate veiling of married women to the flowing locks of maidens and the careful use of natural dyes and precious adornments, every aspect was created. For a date, the chosen hairstyle and its accompanying ornaments would communicate her social standing, her adherence to propriety, and her personal taste, all while contributing to her overall aura of beauty and desirability. It was a silent language, understood by all, conveying her readiness for courtship and her place in the intricate tapestry of medieval society. Number 1. The crown of manhood. Navigating masculine hair and headwear. For a medieval gentleman preparing for a significant date, perhaps a chivalric tournament where he hoped to impress, or a formal supper with a lady and her family, his hair and headwear choices were as deliberate and symbolic as those of his female counterpart. Masculine grooming, while perhaps less overtly elaborate than women's, was deeply tied to prevailing fashions, social status, profession, and sometimes even political or religious affiliations. A man's coiffure and the hat he chose were powerful non-verbal cues that communicated his identity and intentions. Throughout the Middle Ages, the popularity of beards fluctuated significantly. In certain periods, particularly during the early medieval era and parts of the Crusader period, beards were highly valued, symbolizing wisdom, maturity, strength, and even religious devotion. A full, well-maintained beard could denote a man's status as a knight, a scholar, or a respected elder. For example, during the time of the Crusades, many knights and pilgrims grew beards as a sign of their commitment to their vows, echoing biblical figures. A man aiming to project an image of gravitas and experience for a date might cultivate a beard carefully trimmed and oiled. Oils, often scented with herbs or spices, would be applied to keep the beard soft and lustrous, preventing it from appearing wild or unkempt. Conversely, there were periods when being clean-shaven was the prevailing fashion, particularly from the 12th century onwards in many parts of Western Europe. A smooth face was sometimes associated with youth, sophistication, and a more refined, courtly aesthetic. Kings and nobles often set the trend, and their portraits show a clear preference for a clean-shaven look. Barbers, who were also often surgeons in medieval times, provided shaving surfaces using sharpened razors. This was a regular, sometimes daily ritual for men of means. For a date, choosing to be clean-shaven when it was fashionable might convey a man's attention to contemporary trends and his youthful vigor. The choice between beard or no beard was often a deliberate one, reflecting current ideals of masculinity. Hair length and style for men also varied widely. In the early Middle Ages, longer hair was common, sometimes flowing to the shoulders, particularly for nobility. This reflected a more barbarian or tribal aesthetic that predated fully developed feudal systems. As the centuries progressed, styles became more structured. The bowl cut was a widely popular style from the 13th to the 15th century, characterized by hair cut evenly around the head, often just below the ears, resembling an inverted bowl. This practical and neat style was adopted by men of various social strata, from peasants to merchants. It was easy to maintain and kept hair out of the way for daily activities. Another prominent style was the page boy, where hair was slightly longer, often reaching the nape of the neck and sometimes gently curled inwards. This style, often seen on young nobles and courtiers, exuded a sense of youthful elegance and aristocratic refinement. For a man preparing for a date, selecting a well-groomed page boy or bowl cut would project an image of orderliness and adherence to current fashion, suggesting he was a man of good taste and presentability. Hair was typically kept clean, often washed with herbal rinses and combed regularly with bone or wooden combs, ensuring it looked healthy and lustrous. Headwear for men was perhaps even more diverse and socially significant than their hairstyles. It served not only as protection from the elements, but also as a powerful indicator of social class, profession, and status. For a date, the choice of headwear was a crucial part of a man's overall presentation. The simple coif, a close-fitting white linen cap tied under the chin, was a basic and widely used piece of headwear, particularly for working men and scholars. It protected the hair from dust and grime and was often worn indoors or as an underlayer beneath other hats. While simple, its cleanliness could speak volumes about a man's attention to hygiene. The chaperon was one of the most distinctive and fashionable male headwear items from the 14th and 15th centuries. Originally a simple hood, it evolved into a complex turban-like head covering. Part that originally covered the head, the capuchin, was often worn on top, while the shoulder cape, the cornet, was draped elegantly around the neck or over one shoulder. The long dangling tail, liripipe, of the chaperon could be wrapped around the head or left to hang, adding flair. Chaperons were made from various materials, from simple wool for everyday wear to luxurious silks, velvets, and brocades for the wealthy, often in vibrant colors. For a nobleman or wealthy merchant, a finely crafted chaperon was a clear sign of wealth and fashion consciousness, making it an excellent choice for a date. It proclaimed his status without needing words. Other forms of headwear included simple caps made of wool or felt, worn by commoners, or more elaborate felt or beaver hats that could signify a merchant's prosperity. Hoods, either attached to cloaks or worn separately, provided warmth and served as a practical head covering, particularly for travelers or those spending time outdoors. Helmets, of course, were the headwear of choice for knights and soldiers, worn during combat or display. While not for a date, the presence of a well-maintained helmet in a knight's entourage or displayed in his home would subtly speak to his prowess and standing. The selection of a particular hat or head covering for a date was a carefully considered decision. A man would choose a piece that not only complemented his attire, but also conveyed the appropriate message about his wealth, his adherence to current trends, and his social aspirations. A man of humble means might simply ensure his cap was clean and in good repair, while a wealthy suitor might choose a jewel-encrusted chaperon. Each choice was a silent declaration of self, reflecting his character and his place in the world. Just as a lady's veil spoke of her modesty, a gentleman's chosen headwear, whether a practical coif or a flamboyant chaperon, was a vital component of his meticulously crafted image for any significant social encounter. Was the final touch, the crown on his prepared persona, ready to make his impression.